This is part two of my research unit. So, I've had kids gather their research through my research scale, the progressions, and the assessment and lesson sequence. Now I want them to be able to organize it into an argumentative essay. So, I've taken my standards and unpacked them. I've started with W1, which is the argumentative writing standard, draw evidence from literary or informational texts, so W9, and then the language 3, which is knowing how language functions in different contexts. So I took those standards, unpacked them, using the taxonomy, creating a scale from simple to complex. I've given some rationales and some reasonings as to why I put them at the learning goal level analysis and where I felt things were more at the comprehension level retrieval. So after that, I've really kind of gotten more comfortable with the color coding versus the alpha coding that I showed in the research scale. It just makes more sense to me. This one, if you've watched the research video, you're going to realize this one is not as linear as the research one. In my research one, my colors were pretty much in order because I felt like that was the order in which I would teach, and I organized my targets in a fashion where they were already kind of clumped together. However, with the argument one, I realized I wasn't as linear, and that writing, when you start organizing your unit of study around writing, it isn't as neat. So you see that reflected in my color coding when I started grouping related targets. So the second stage that I did was group these targets based on what I thought I would probably use and teach together, which then I got into my lesson cluster sequence. So here, lesson cluster one thing I did not put in here that I think I would is a pre-assessment. And the reason for that pre-assessment is this is 12th grade, and kids have been getting argumentative writing since the 5th grade. And I think that in the 7th grade is when they get first introduced to the counter argument. So some of this stuff should not be new. However, we can always become a better writer. I don't know if we ever arrive as writers. So I want to give this pre-assessment to figure out where my kids are in terms of argumentative writing. And I know I can there's a variety of different writing prompts within the district bank that we've created that I could use to assess kids. And that would help me determine how much whole group this would be and how much small group writers workshop instruction I would have. So here, I want them to draw on their research. I'm going to go back to their research organizer. Lesson cluster 2, keeping in mind that sometimes a lesson can be more than one day, and it can be less than one day. If you see here, lesson cluster 2, I've kind of arranged for 2 days. I looked at Tomlin's model of argumentation, but then I thought as a senior, how cool would it be if we allowed kids to choose the form of argumentation that they felt most fit. So I found this document online that talks about the different types of writing, classical Western. This was new to me. Here's the Tomlin argument, and then the Rogerian argument. So I feel like kids at this point should be able to choose the form of argumentation, the structure, etc., that they would use. And I think that this is certainly going to tie into this organization here. So again, as I'm going through this, things change as I learn about my lesson sequence. So I go into lesson cluster 2, where I have kids taking their research and organizing it into a logical and relevant way. Lesson 3 is where they start really developing and putting some meat around it. This is probably maybe a little bit of pre-writing, I would say. I think graphic organizers, mind maps, sometimes free writes will really get at this. And I know I'm going to have to do some modeling around here, especially if kids got some fairly sophisticated topics. Lesson cluster 4 is where I feel like they really start drafting out that writing. And I really want them to save the introduction and conclusion till the end of their drafting process. I think in the past I've made the mistake of having kids start with the introduction, But really, I think when you formulate your body, the introduction and conclusion kind of come naturally. But what I really want them to have first and foremost is that claim, or what we call thesis statement. Lesson cluster 5 is where we start going in and looking at word choice and making sure everything links and our tone is correct. Our word choice is really supporting kind of this formal objective tone that we're trying to take, or subjective based on your purpose. And this lesson cluster 6 where they write their final draft. What I did not include in my research one was the 4, where if a kid's really nailed this argumentative paper, and I've got some kids who are not quite there yet who need a little bit more support, what do I do for the kids who have got it? And I think that because of technology and because of how easy it is to reach out into a world beyond school, I'm going to have them try to contact agencies, authoritative organizations, or even the writers themselves of the information they've researched and get feedback from them. And I think that's a very authentic way. I'd really like to push all my kids to this point. I think feedback beyond the teacher is always a good thing. So this is how the scale turned into a clustering of targets, into a sequence of targets, and how I plan to assess those targets along the way. Thanks.